I'm no good at taking good advice, and I'm self-careless, so don't tell me twice that lately I've been so stuck in my head that I forget just about everything my therapist said. Maybe I'm self-helpless. Maybe I'm self-helpless. Maybe I'm self-helpless. Maybe we are all self-helpless.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Self-Helpless. I'm Delanie Fischer, and today I'm chatting with M. Schulz, who is our wonderful recurring guest host here at the Self-Helpless podcast. M's also the co-host of the podcast, and that's why we drink. And today we're chatting about stage fright, performance anxiety, social anxiety, all the scaries, and we are sharing personal tips and tricks that have helped us with our own stage fright in the past, present day, in different settings. And this topic came up when Em and I were just hanging out, talking about their upcoming tour. And Em went from someone who was terrified of the stage, I mean, sobbing, nonverbal, couldn't eat, that really intense kind of fear leading up to a live performance. And now Em can go on stage and actually have a pretty good time and not be so terrified leading up to it, can actually enjoy the days leading up to the show. And a big part of that is due to a specific kind of therapy M has been doing. So it's just been a huge transformation. And I wanted you all to hear about it because whether you're an entertainer or public speaking is part of your job in some way, whether you're a teacher, lawyer, you give a lot of presentations at work, or maybe you have a toast you have to give at an upcoming wedding or other social event, we can all find what works for each of us in order to dial down the intensity of the stage fright. It might never go away completely, but we can reduce it and find ways to reduce it that work for us. This is not an episode about stage fright from a medical or physiological standpoint. It's just two friends talking about how the hell to manage this stuff, why we're collectively afraid of attention, where that comes from, the root of that issue, and the weird things that have worked for us, everything from rituals, one-liners we say on stage, types of food we eat on show days to help with upset stomach, mindset tips, therapeutic practices, and just other hacks that have helped us get through and not, pass out or shit our pants on stage. And I guess even then you could always have a pillow and a diaper close to you at all times. So, hey, hot tips already. Here is my chat with M. M, thank you so much for coming back for another guest hosted episode. What do I call these? Guest host, guest co-host, ghosted episode? I mean, that's on brand.
The co-ghost. No, that's what you said was better.
Another ghosted episode with M. Schulz, everybody. I have gushed about your live show on the podcast already, but I just got to tell you, I'm so glad you're back from tour because I get to see you more. But your live show was just so fantastic, and everybody needs to go see, and that's why we drink live. It is just so well done, and you just absolutely killed it. And it was just, I had a blast, and it's just such a unique experience. I've never seen anything like it, and you both do it so well. So anyway,
well,
glad to have you back. But
hey, it's Gemini season. My ego is fully formed. Just kidding. I love the praise. But no, it actually worked out really well because if you asked me to come on and talk about stage fright, it wouldn't have felt right to do if you hadn't seen the show before hearing the behind the scenes. So no, thank you. That means a lot. Especially, I was most nervous. I've already told you this, but I was most nervous for you to be in the audience because you actually you've done this. You've done the comedy and the being on stage. So your feedback was very important. So this is a delightful surprise that you were just that moved by me. So
oh my gosh, that's so funny that you were nervous for me to see it because I mean, yes, I did do stand up, but I also left it. So it's like
fair. That's a fair point.
No, but it was so good. And yeah, I mean, selfishly, I'm glad that I get you back for a little bit, but I also cannot wait to see your next live show. But yeah, I mean, when we were just talking as friends about your stage fright stuff, I just thought it would be such a great episode to talk about, both of our experiences and the process that you've kind of been going through to help you with this. And I know this is going to help a lot of people. A lot of people have written into the show about having performance anxiety, social anxiety, stage fright, all that kind of stuff. So whether somebody's a performer or they have to give a toast at a wedding soon, or they have to give a lot of presentations at work, I know that a lot of people struggle with this in one way, shape, or form.
I have to give a toast soon at a friend's wedding.
Yeah.
Wow, I don't wanna do it. I like and this is my childhood best friend. I really should have been preparing since childhood because I knew it was coming, and now the time has come, and I'm like, "Oh, shit, I don't wanna do this at all." So, it feels on par with having to go on stage in front of a million people.
Oh my
It's
gosh. Yeah. Can we
it's
talk about
awful.
that a little bit? Like, what are the similarities and differences? I mean, you were on stage in front of a ton of people recently, and then you're gonna give a toast at a wedding in front of, I don't know, probably less people,
Yeah,
I would
probably
assume.
not hundreds and hundreds, yeah.
Right.
Um
So what's similar and what's different about that experience for you when it comes to stage fright?
Well, I think I have a different, relationship to, stage fright than most people do because I always get this weird look when I say it, but so I'm assuming that's what makes it different, is I hear a lot of people say that it's so much easier to perform or to give a speech when someone they know is in the audience.
Oh,
I can't imagine a greater hell than
yes.
having somebody I know in the audience. I would prefer nobody I know there because my interpretation of it, everyone else is like, "Oh, but you have someone to support you." No, that's not true. For me, it's like, I have to look you in the eye the next day if I fuck
Yeah.
up. The idea of somebody I know watching me flop and then we have to, like, be friends the next day, because then I'm like, "Oh, if you say it was good, then how can I trust that you're not just trying to make me feel better when we both know I messed up?" Versus if it's n nobody I know is there, I never have to look at you again.
Yeah.
Uh, so when I think about having to give a speech with all my friends and family there, I'm like, "Wow, this is so much worse than any show I've ever done."
I completely agree. That's exactly my experience. I would rather not know a single person in an audience.
And honestly, I have to thank you. I'll do it publicly right here on this platform because nobody else seems to get it, and of course, someone else who has performed on stage is the person who handled it with perfect grace, because I've told everybody I know, my mother, I'm like, "You cannot let me know you're gonna be there. I need you to just say, maybe I'll attend, or just straight up lie to me and say you're not coming, and then
Right.
tell me after the show, and that'll be a lovely time to let me know you saw it." You're
Right.
the only person in, like, 6 years of touring who has actually stuck to that promise, and anytime I mention the show, I'd be like, "Hey, just so you know, you may or may not you're already on the list if you come, if you don't," and you'd be like, I'm not coming," or so that was lovely, but nobody I think everyone else thinks that I'm joking, and I'm like, "This it's not funny."
Yeah.
This is where I thank you for being so on top of it, but it would make sense because you get it, so
Yeah, I feel like, my best sets ever was when I was in a faraway town in a room full of
Mhm.
strangers and nobody knew me, not a soul, and
Yep.
I felt fully like I could just do whatever. I felt very free, and I'm not gonna see these people again. But yeah, it really does heighten that, so it totally makes sense. Do you feel like you're more nervous to give this speech at a wedding, equally nervous as you get on stage?
I think
Where are
more
you at? Wow.
because it's not even just one person I know in the audience. Everyone in the audience is somebody I have known intimately for my entire life. So it's
Yeah.
just the worst. And at my shows, I know the audience. I know that there's people who align with my values, and at a wedding, there's other people. They're gonna be like, "What's this girl in a suit doing?" So I just don't really want to deal
Mhm.
with the weird eyes from the shifty grandpa in the corner, you know?
Yes, that
So,
makes sense. Oh my gosh, what a good point.
yeah, a lot of layers.
Yeah.
At least it's a lot shorter. It'll be like 5 minutes max compared to a 2-hour set, so, in some ways it's better, but yeah, hoping to just find one person who's really drunk. That's what I do with my girlfriend. I make her get drunk before my shows because then I feel like there's a chance she won't remember in case I mess up. So, I'm just gonna pay attention to the really drunk person in the room and just they're gonna be my muse for the night.
Yeah, find a spot on the wall. You find the drunkest person in the room. I love it. Um, are you, like, putting pressure on yourself to memorize the whole thing? Or are you gonna have, like, paper that you're reading off of for your speech?
I feel like it's classier to do it without a piece of paper, but I
Yeah.
don't also, here's the other thing, everyone in that room knows that I have massive stage fright, so if I'm
Right.
getting up there and reading it at all or doing it at all,
Yeah.
um, anytime I've gone to a wedding and someone else is doing the speech, I'm just like, "Oh, thank God it's not me." I don't care how they do it. So hopefully that's how people are thinking. I was gonna say, you've done a speech like that,
Yeah.
right? You just did one.
Well, yeah, it's so funny that I was even doing stand up or in that world for 6.5 years because it was so opposite to my personality. Like I have a lot of stage fright, and then I was on stage, obviously.
Mhm.
I don't like being out at night around strangers.
You really don't like being out at all.
I know. I'm such a homebody. And I really don't like being like I don't like the traveling part. I hate public transportation. I get very
Mhm.
anxious. I hate flying. It was just everything was opposite for me. And I'm like, what am I doing? No wonder I'm just struggling every day. It was totally not
Right.
aligned with my what I need and my personality. But that aspect that I did like of the joke writing and stuff like that, and like I gotta figure out how to plug this in somewhere else in a lifestyle that fits me better. But I left because I didn't like all of that. But
Mhm.
what happened is that people started asking me to officiate their wedding or give the maid of honor speech or give the
Right.
toast. So at this point, I think I've officiated 6 or 7 weddings. I can't even count how many toasts I've given at weddings and stuff like that, or like welcome toasts or whatever, because my friends and family know that I have public speaking experience. And so many people don't want to give the speech at the wedding. And so they ask
Right.
me to do it because they're like, well, you've done it before and you're probably more comfortable with it, but I'm actually not more comfortable with it.
Right.
I still get just as nervous as maybe somebody doing it for the first time, if not more so, because I feel like there's this extra pressure when
Mhm.
somebody knows or thinks that you're a comedian, or like, oh, you were doing this, and getting paid for it. You're going to have this hilarious wedding toast or this, whatever. And I feel like it's extra pressure that if somebody that went up there that didn't
Totally.
have that experience. And so it's actually, I think sometimes harder for me to get up and do something like you said, in front of a bunch of people that I know, because they know all these different parts of me too. I mean, they knew me before I was a performer. They know me now.
Yeah.
It's just a weird feeling. But no, and I've had to just kind of stop saying yes, because I'm like, I had to kind of cut it down to just, all right, family and very, very close friends, because I started getting a lot of asks for it. And I'm like, I left this world for a reason. I don't like being
Yeah.
on stage by myself or in that position at all. So it's interesting to hear that you feel nervous for like the personal speeches too. That makes me feel a little bit better,
Oh,
honestly.
good. I was gonna say, do you have, the same level or as like it sounds like maybe a more intense anxiety when it's your closest friends, or do you feel like because they're your closest friends and family, that they don't have the same pressure, they're not putting the same pressure on you as this, like, big, comedian compared to other people?
That is such a good question. I feel like it's been the same level of nerves for every wedding.
Okay, that's how I feel.
Whether I'm giving a 2-minute speech or I'm, officiating the ceremony or something, and I have to read off of the paper. I don't memorize anything, because I'm
Mhm.
like, I know what that feels like, doing a whatever 30-minute plus set and having everything like memorized and not looking at notes, and that anxiety, I can at least control that not being there
That's what I do, yeah,
by having
because 'cause
the
I'm like,
paper.
I already hate it so much up here. I am just going to I'm gonna slap whatever Band-Aids on I can, and if anyone's got a problem with it, they can come up on stage and do it. So
Right? And it's so funny, now that I've seen you perform, I would never know that you have stage fright. You look really comfortable up there. It's very natural and organic. So that's also kind of a hard relationship too, right? Where you're experiencing something internally that the audience is not picking up on. It's
I know.
and I used to get that feedback too. I'm like, how can you not see that I'm dying up there?
It's
And people are like,
infuriating.
"Oh, you look as cool as a cucumber." I would never know. I'm like, "Oh, I it's because I'm so scared that I can't move probably."
Oh, yes. Yes,
So
I've told a few people, I'm like, I would have less anxiety if someone told me they were going to, I don't know, perform surgery on me without anesthesia. Like, I'm like, so like it's infuriating because it's almost, I mean, it is incredibly invalidating when people are like, not that I would never know. That's a compliment, but to hear people go like, it can't be that bad. You look so fine up there. Like I literally for the last week, I've been catatonic. I've been nonverbal. I can't get out of bed. I can't eat except like having like really basic easy foods because I have such an
yeah.
upset stomach. The building up to it is the worst part because I'm just making it worse
Yes.
and worse and I'm catastrophizing it in my head. And then once I get up there, even when I'm having stage fright in the middle of the performance, it's never as bad as the anxiety building up to it was. But there was
Yes.
like a whole week of mental burden leading up to this, it's maddening to be like, I promise you, I was not being dramatic about how scared I am.
Right, and a lot of performers, they struggle with this. I mean, everybody has some nerves in one way or another, but there's different levels that people have, but they just do it anyway, right? Like,
Yeah.
you hear about the Steve Martin throwing up before every show or Adele having really bad stage fright. It's just something that they know it's gonna happen and they still perform. So, I
Yeah,
think
it's like
where
it's abusive to yourself. It's like, "Oh, it's okay that I am, throwing up every night. That's fine as long as people are having a good time." Like, it's so sick, some of the turmoil you go through.
Now, do you feel like the nerves and stage fright and all of that anxiety and all that, feeling ill is worth the high and the benefit and the feeling of performing or even the feeling that you get afterward?
As time goes on, the answer becomes yes, because at the beginning, I would have been like, "No, this was not worth it." To be absolutely frank with you, when I first started going on stage, that was my one non-negotiable with my co-host when the podcast took off. I was like, my one thing is we can never go on stage. And there was at the time
Wow.
I mean, podcasters, there weren't as many podcasts, nearly as many podcasts, but there were also a lot less that were traveling and going on tour. And so I
Yeah.
didn't really think it would affect me. I was like, even if the podcast takes off, at least no one's expecting me to go on tour. So we're in the clear. And my co-host knew that we were never going on stage, blah, 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 blah. But then an agent showed up and said, "You would be making significantly more money than you are at your current job." So, and then I really had to be like, "Okay, I have to sit with myself and be like, is the money worth it, or do I need to respect my own fears and
Wow.
respect my boundaries?" And I did not respect my boundaries. I was like, "That money sounds really good." So, I'm gonna have to and I was like, "I'm gonna have to figure out this anxiety thing." It was awful. It was so awful, but I never I had always experienced the stage fright since I was a little kid. So to get back to your question, after, reconciling with myself that I'd have to just figure it out and go on stage, after my first show, I was like, was that worth it? And I think it was 50-50 at the time, because that was getting up on that stage was probably one of the scariest moments of my life. At that point, I was sobbing every day, days and days before the show. To get up on the stage within a half an hour of being up there, I was nowhere near as nervous because it was happening before my very eyes, that no one was dying. I was fine. It was okay.
Right.
Everyone was laughing. And when I got off the stage and people were applauding, and it was almost that dopamine rush, like the endorphin hit of like, oh, it's over. And so
Yeah.
in that way, it felt 50-50. Today, it's so worth the anxiety, but that's because I managed it so much better. So
Yes. Oh
what
my
about
gosh.
you?
If it was just stage fright, I think that I was dealing with the stand-up stuff, I think I would have continued, but it was everything about it. It was like I towards the end it was like I like 5% of this. I can't stay for
Mm,
5%. I got to just find I got to take that 5% with me and plug it in somewhere else. Because it was just the day-to-day lifestyle of it. Not my jam.
it's exhausting,
Yeah, it's exhausting. I think it's cool to go on a tour and then be able to come back for a long period of time, then go on another like small one.
right?
I could see myself being more open to something like that, but I think that would even still be hard for me. I was going to ask you, we're on a human evolution level. Are we get stage fright because we're afraid of humiliating ourselves in front of the group of people,
I
and
think so.
we're afraid we're going to have a target on our back if we look stupid and then get kicked out and then die in a forest by ourselves. Like, why does the fight or flight kick in for public speaking? It's so strange.
There must be something primal to it, because isn't it like more people are afraid of public speaking than literal dying? Like,
Right.
so
Right.
I mean, so there has to be something instinctive to that,
Right.
especially when there's so many. I think it's like 80% or something. It's a massive number, but everyone is scared of public speaking. If you're not, you are just a diamond in the rough, and good for you. Um, so I don't know where it comes from. I would think for me, I mean, I've gone through a lot of therapy, so I've got my own like personal journey with it. But if I'm thinking about it as a whole, I would say you're afraid of being like the weak one in the group, or if you're being judged or you do something wrong, maybe you feel like you're the next, I don't know, survival of the fittest. If you're the weakest link in the room, then you're next
Right.
on the chopping block. I have no idea. I'm trying to
That's the
think of like
only thing I can think of is like exactly, you're gonna be the next outcast if you don't
right.
if they don't find you valuable or
Yeah.
whatever. And
Or
but
maybe
it's
if
so
if you're
weird.
not entertaining enough, then you are failing your community, maybe something like that. I have no clue.
I know I could just speculate for hours. Like, or was it because the leaders of the group were usually the ones speaking in a crowd and they had the biggest target on their back? So
Oh,
that's
that's a great point.
I don't know. It's just like that's where my head always goes. It's like, why? Why do we have this? It's so strange.
Do you have any idea about what the core element of your stage fright is? Like, have you always had stage fright since you were a little kid, or did something happen to develop it?
I don't think I had stage fright as a kid. I don't
Mhm.
think that it kicked in until later that I should feel really conscious and scared and freaked out in front of people. So, I was in little plays and stuff growing up, in elementary school. I did like the speech meet. I sang a song at my dad and stepmom's wedding when I was 8 or 9. I mean,
Oh
so
my god.
I didn't feel that. And I think the first time I had really bad stage fright was when I was in college, so I would have been 19 or 20 at this point, maybe 20. And it was for a theater class that I was taking with my friend, and the final was performing an original monologue in front of a live audience. And that was my first big hit with stage fright. And I don't know, it's interesting because the first time I did that, I was able to like read off of a paper and recite this monologue and ended up kind of being a comedic like piece. But the first time I did this, I lost my place and I did fuck up. And so all I could do in the moment was say, well, shit, I lost my place. Or like,
Yeah.
well, fuck, I lost my place. I don't know what I'm doing up here. And it got a laugh. So I'm like, oh, you can just be honest with your fuck ups and it's okay. And I
Mhm.
was able to continue. And I think, wow, I think me fucking up actually made that performance better or at least more, I don't know, human or
Human.
something,
Yeah.
right? And so I think that helped me in a way with stand up of course I always still had stage fright, but I learned early on like you can fuck up and still do a good job or you can make a mistake and still get them back or something.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I tried to kind of keep that with me. And so I had, different systems and stuff for if I did mess up or forget a line or if you know, I knew like if I could just trust myself to trust my instincts in the moment and not try to
Mhm.
over plan that I would at least survive the set. But what about you? You said that you always had stage fright even as a kid?
Mhm. The only time ever I remember not having stage fright was in my public speaking class in college. But I think it's because we were all in the same boat. Like
Right.
everyone was terrified. And so that took the pressure off me. Like we were all being forced by a grade to do this.
Yeah.
And there were people who were even worse than I was. I mean, they were physically you could tell they were visually just so petrified. And so in that class alone, that was the only time I didn't mind getting up in front of people because I knew also it was a college class. I was like, half the people aren't listening anyway, so whatever. Um, but then only like a couple of months later, I had a different college class where I had to perform, and that petrified me. It felt just like childhood. I mean, I was a mess since I was a kid. Being in a spotlight, um, I would fake sick to get out of like my elementary school plays, or I would have the music teacher like write in like non speaking parts. Like I played a tree quite a lot when I was a kid.
Mm.
I was a year-round athlete all my years of middle school and all my years of high school, and not a single game was my mom invited to. I didn't want anyone to see me perform. I would fake injuries quite a lot. Every single season, I surprisingly had 3 sprained ankles. And so I
Oh,
had to be
wow. So you even
eh
had performance anxiety with sports.
oh, anytime I'm being looked at and potentially perceived or judged or whatever. I mean, I just was
Interesting.
so
Yeah.
and part of me always thought, like, maybe I'm, like, afraid of failure, but, like, I'm kind of, like, not the greatest success in a lot of places, so, like, it's not like this failure thing eats at me. I've never felt like I needed to be a perfectionist, so I
Right.
feel pretty human in those ways, so I don't think it never felt right to say that I had this fear of failure. I just didn't want anyone looking at me. I just had, like, I just wanted nobody to look at me, and if I ever found out my mom was coming to a game, instantly sprain an ankle. I would fake a fall in front of everybody so I had witnesses, and I would not be able to play the next day. So,
Wow.
yeah, I hated always having eyes on me, and then in college, I had a thing where I had to perform, And I was like, "Oh my God, like this it's never gonna go away. I'm just always gonna have this fear." And I think it was even harder on me because my mom, for her job, she's a public speaker. And so I think I just grew up with it being like normal to be in the spotlight. And I was just like, oh, I guess that gene didn't pass on through me. I guess, it ends with her because I'm never going to get on a stage. Ironically, that became my
Oh my
whole
gosh.
stupid
Yeah.
job. Um, but the comedy writes itself. So
Oh my god. It's interesting that you had the stage fright stuff kick in even with, being around other people, right? Like on a team or what sports did you play? Was it a team sport?
I did soccer, basketball, and tennis was my main one.
Okay, okay, gotcha. Tennis, I guess, is a little bit more individual, I guess, than being
Yeah.
on a big team.
Part of me always thought maybe my mom was a bit of a socialite in our town. I grew up in a small town, so it didn't take much to be the socialite, but, um, but she was of the group, and I went to, like, the private school in town, so, I feel like there were some more critical looks on, who you are or, where you're placing and things.
Mm.
So, my go-to thought was, "Oh, I clearly don't want these hoity-toity private school moms who are exactly the stereotype you're thinking. I don't want them looking at me and I'm not good enough or I shouldn't be part of the team or their kid should have gotten a spot here when I got the spot." So I always assumed that was the problem, but in hindsight, it went all the way down to childhood, and I don't know. They weren't there yet, so I don't know what the critical moment was where I officially was nervous of anyone looking at me. I mean, do you remember having
Yeah.
this defining moment where the fear kicked in?
I feel like, yeah, if we look under the layers of what are we actually afraid of? Why are we afraid of making mistakes in front of people? Nobody's perfect, everybody makes mistakes. I think everybody's self-conscious or has been at some point in their life. So is that part of them kicking in when it comes to
Mhm.
speaking in front of people? Do they still feel like, the preteen that it was awkward looking or whatever it is for them? For me, with my appearance, where I just, I had the whole braces, really bad acne. I mean, I felt like I was always sweaty and sunburnt for some I'm just like,
There's
what
always a
was
a
going
weird sheen on you, yeah.
Yes. I was like, why was I always sunburnt, but just for the very tip top of my forehead in every photo? And I was, I was wearing big basketball shorts and flannel. Nothing really looked like it was going
Oh
well
my
for
god.
me. That's when I started feeling very self-conscious because people would comment about it. So
Mm,
what came first? Did I feel self-conscious first? Like I kind of knew like, well, this isn't going well. Or was it the first comments that started rolling in from kids my age? You have a lot of pimples on your face, or you have this, or you have that, whatever. I was very, very skinny too. So, like the girls are like getting curves and stuff, and I'm not, right? Like it's just everything.
yeah.
And so all these comments started coming in that make me feel very really self-conscious and like would I think I would have probably felt that just by comparing myself
Mhm.
and stuff, but I don't know. I think that was a big part of it, but it's weird to think, okay, a decade or so later, you're not in that same spot, but you still feel insecure in the same way in front of people, even though your logical brain knows, okay, it's not the same situation. But is
Well,
that
I
kicking in?
I get yeah, I mean, it makes sense if we're thinking about what's, like, the primal thing that goes all the way back where people are scared of this. It
Right.
feels like puberty is the perfect time for that kind of self-consciousness to kick in just because you're so desperate to blend in. So maybe there's still something
Right.
that
Right.
sits with all of us where we still are so afraid of looking like the outsider in the group, and I grew up not really being aware of my own puberty at the time. I think I was aware of other people changing and maybe looking at me for comparison, but I feel like it never really hit me the way it hit other people. But I still remember socially being always worried about being judged. I just didn't wanna stick out. So
Yeah.
maybe I just didn't wanna stick out by literally being the only person on a stage with all eyes on me. But
Yeah. As far as your gender identity and stuff like that, were you already
yeah.
having those feelings in puberty age? Like, what was going on for you with that as well?
Certainly my sexuality. I
Yeah.
wasn't aware of the concept of gender, didn't know you could move from gender to gender like that yet. It was like 2005 in the South, so
Yeah.
not
Oh
even on the
God.
radar. I didn't even hear the word bisexual until high school. I just thought you're either straight or gay, and so I went, "Well, I guess of the 2, I guess I'm gay." And so
Mm.
that's what I was
Mm.
working with, but I was certainly closeted, so I wasn't not like I was doing anything that anyone would have caught me in, but maybe I felt like there was some sort of glaring difference about me that other people were seeing, the paranoia sets in and you just wonder if anyone's clocking it. I'm sure that played a factor into it. You were
Yeah.
saying that as a teenager that there was a lot going on and people were commenting on it. The irony of some of the best comedians is that they have mastered self-deprecation. And I feel like not everyone's material, but a lot of people can laugh at themselves now. And so,
Yeah.
do you feel like it actually helped later to feel so like sticking out like a sore thumb when you were younger?
I do feel like when I first started stand up, it was very helpful to have a lot of self-deprecating material. I think it's a simple way to start, and I think it eases your own nerves too. As a comic, I was not a one-liner comedian. I was definitely a storyteller with punchlines within the stories,
Mhm.
but I would always start off with a one-liner just to ease my own anxiety, so I
Oh,
could get
cool.
to a punchline very fast before getting into like what I would call my real jokes or whatever.
Smart.
And so it was more for me to, yeah, I think it started off with, I'm going to say a self deprecating one liner up top, and then I'll get into my set. And then it kind of changed from, I'm just going to say a one liner, doesn't have to be self deprecating. So it helped ease me into that world because when you're walking up on stage, people are projecting things on you and making assumptions about you. And it's almost like, can you beat them? Can you beat them
Oh,
to the
yeah.
punch? Right? Like, I'm going to take everything that you guys are thinking about me right now, and I'm going to say it first so we can get that out of the way and get into
Right.
the jokes. Right. So, of course, I would, talk about my appearance in some way or, whatever it would be. And I
Did
felt like it did help.
did
It
it did you
helped
feel
me.
like this might be a little maybe woo-woo, but is that do you feel like any part of your, like, inner child healed by getting up in front of everyone and beating them to the punchline and all that, or
I don't know if I was making that connection at all. It did feel good to I was always the quiet kid, and now
Mm,
I had a voice. That was a weird kind of transformation. Or, I remember in college, that's when I started performing. So I started performing my senior year right before I graduated, but my freshman year, I thought this guy was really cute. and I would never have talked to him ever as a freshman in college. And then I'm on stage as a senior and I see him in the audience and he's cracking up. And
Oh,
I was like, oh, so you know who I am now. Oh, this is cool.
that's
So
such a great story. Oh my
I
god, that's
I
so
did
great.
kind of have like a moment of you didn't know who I was. I mean, I was also not introducing myself to you, but yeah, here I am. And you can't not see me. That's
Mhm.
weird. So
Oh, that's
that was
so
weird.
powerful.
Yeah, so I guess I did kind of have moments like that, but it wasn't conscious. Like, okay, now I have this voice as the quiet kid, and I'm going to get back at
Sure.
everybody who was a dick to me or whatever, you know. And hey, if that does fuel you, that's fine too. Yeah, I don't know. It was just I had a lot of insecurity around my appearance, and then I still felt like the really awkward kid
Mhm.
and teenager. And then, I did my appearance changed, but I still felt very uncomfortable in my own skin for a really long time, to the
Sure.
point where I wouldn't even register if somebody was like flirting with me or hitting on me. That would not ever cross my mind. And
Totally get
so
it.
I would have to have friends, Lainey, that person is like
Delaney,
asking
wake
you
up.
out. I'm
Yeah.
like, no, no
Look
one's
alive,
here.
girl.
I had a friend, I'm like, I don't know if I've ever told you this story. I was at a bar with my friend, and this guy came over to us, and he asked us, he said, well, he directed the question at me. He said, oh, it's my job here to make sure all the beautiful women have a drink or something. And I was like, are you serious? That's your job? Are they
Oh my
hiring?
god, Delaney.
I said, that's such a fun job. Are they hiring? And he looks so confused. And my friend who's next to me is like, oh my God, Delaney, he's hitting on you. He's asking if you want a drink. I'm like, oh,
I feel like you actually really did a wonderful job of humbling him because that was not the line that should have been used. That feels so hokey now.
it could be a job in LA. I mean, you never
It
know.
could. It could. I mean, but that's so funny that he probably thought he was so smooth with it, and you immediately went, "Oh, great, are they hiring?" Like, it totally put him back in his place.
Exactly it. Genuinely curious. So, do you feel nervous podcasting? Are your nerves podcasting the same or different as being on stage? Or are there any nerves podcasting? Like when you and Christine
Fair.
do a podcast or anything like that?
I get a little nervous when I'm on other people's shows who I don't know. With you, it's fine. You're one of my best friends, so
Yeah.
this just feels like we're just FaceTiming. But
Yeah, exactly.
But when like we did an interview a couple days ago with somebody and I didn't know them, so I just got a little nervous before. Not nervous to a point where I needed like medication or anything like I do when I'm on stage, but nervous enough where I was like, "Oh, are we gonna click well? Is this episode not gonna sound right?" So I get kind of nervous with that, but when I'm doing the podcast, it's again with one of my best friends, so I feel like it's just FaceTime. So,
Yeah.
and I'm in like the comfort of my own home. I don't have to go anywhere. It doesn't feel like I'm in the studio live. I would definitely be nervous if it was a live situation because you can't edit things if you mess up or whatever. But did you ever get nervous podcasting, or did it at least hit all of your marks because you didn't have to travel, you got to stay home, you were with your friends?
I might get a little bit nervous every once in a while. Maybe, like you said, maybe a guest that I don't really know or something, but not really. I don't it doesn't feel like performance anxiety at all. When I think about being on stage, that feels like a totally different category. And I
Yeah,
also think, yeah, I'm in the comfort of my own home. And I think it's helpful that this is like an audio first medium. And, we do have like a YouTube channel with video, but that's like 0.001% of people view it that way or whatever. It's like
sure.
people are they're listening to it. So I don't feel like I'm being watched or I'm like on display in some
What
way, you
what
know?
about like when we first met and you said, "Oh, I have a comedy special," and my first thought was, "I wanna watch that." Did that freak
Yeah.
you out, or does that stress you out to know that people can still watch you perform at all?
It stresses me out to think about the sets that are out there that I don't have, or the bits that are out there online that I don't have control of taking down if I want. Because I signed my life away at 22 to some random production company. I did that all the time just to make rent. And I wasn't good yet. They're bad jokes, but they're out there
Totally makes
forever.
sense.
That feels way worse than like, look, are there a million things I wish would have been different about the stuff that I've made and put out there? Like, the comedies like Love at First Cousin or whatever it is. Yeah, I can pick that apart all day. And there's jokes that I wish I would have added to it, and I wish my outfit was different, and I can do that. But ultimately, it was an authentic piece. And so I'm okay if somebody watches that.
Okay.
And but it's uncomfortable, but not like the other ones are, because I chose to do that. I think there was like more consent involved, I guess, when I
Sure, that totally makes sense.
look at it. Yeah, I mean, it's really uncomfortable sitting and thinking like, wow, there's jokes that I've written that will never be on stage. Like I won't be able to
Mm,
perform them. That's hard for me, is I didn't get to show the most refined part of myself as a comedian.
yeah.
That's hard because it feels unfinished.
You're like,
Uh,
"Oh, there's a joke that no one's ever gonna hear."
yeah, it's like, oh, this would have been good. Or like, oh, that joke wasn't finished. I would have added 5 more minutes onto it or whatever, but I can't.
On our when we're on tour, the first show, never anything like the last show. Because even though it's a scripted show, it means I get to practice my script 50 times or 20 times or however many cities we're going to. And so the last show is always the best show because it's all of the pieces that have slowly come out of working it and shopping it. And the last
Totally.
show, I remember thinking at the show that you went to, thank God it was the one you went to. That was our last show of the tour, and I went, "Oh, this one, like we know every single bit, every beat, we know exactly what we need to say." So
Yeah.
you definitely saw the best version. So I'm really glad that that was the one you witnessed.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah. That makes sense.
but the first one, we're really I mean, it's basically like a preview night where it's like, "All right, we're gonna see what lands and what doesn't, and we're gonna have to
Right.
start writing immediately before our next show on what worked and what do we take out, what do we add?" So
Oh, that totally makes sense. I mean, yeah, stand-ups, they'll perform their or build and perform their new hour of material for a year or 2, and then they'll film the special. So it makes
mhm,
sense that, okay, the last show is when we've worked out all the kinks and we know where all the
yep.
beats are and all that. Yeah, that's so interesting. How far into stage fright as a performer did you say, okay, I want to get help with this?
Immediately. Well, I thank God my co-host, had already taken anti-anxiety medication before. At one point, she actually had to give a speech in college that really stressed her out, and she was given a temporary, dose of, like, beta blockers, propranolol.
Mm.
And propranolol, it's a blood pressure medication, but it weirdly has this side effect. It happens to also be a great stage fright medication because it lowers your blood pressure, it lowers your heart rate, so all the freak out sensations you have can't happen. My co-host had said, "Oh, I took propranolol once and it like changed my life. Like, here's the number to my psychiatrist." If she had never taken that propranolol before she even met me, I wouldn't even know where to start in the world of medication. I wouldn't know where to go. So she really, I mean, it was a game changer. I went to her psychiatrist. I on that day got a prescription for propranolol, and that was before even our very first show. Now, leading up to our first show, I was still a complete mess despite taking propranolol because in hindsight they gave me the lowest dose a person can be on, and hindsight's 2020. I would have ramped that thing up. I would have been on so much more, and I would have experienced a lot less fear. But after so many years now where I have a very regular prescription for propranolol now at a higher dose, and that got me through the first tour where I was like, okay, I'm experimenting with my dosage a little bit. I'm feeling better. And as more shows go on, I am feeling more comfortable on stage. So it's always the first one that's the scariest after not being on stage for a while.
Yeah.
So getting more comfortable on stage plus figuring out my like perfect cocktail with propranolol, I was doing pretty good. And then this last tour I went on, I also added Xanax to the mix, which wow, dream come true. Can't can't give Xanax a shout out enough. I didn't know I was missing something. I was like, "Oh, I still feel really, like, awful when I'm taking my propranolol, but it's a less awful." But I guess that's what the medication is for. I didn't know you could feel absolutely fine, and,
Wow.
Xanax really did that for me. But the secret ingredient, I mean, I'm very pro medication if you can get your hands on those things for, the right type of reasons, go for it. But, I mean, the therapy I've been through in the last year has absolutely changed my life. I would say medication and therapy go hand in hand with me. Maybe for some people it's just one or the other. But, I mean, have you ever taken any beta blockers or anything like that?
I've never, and then as you were talking about that, like, I wonder if I would have tried that, if it would have eased my nerves enough to feel better doing it. But then I'm like, "Oh, I would still have the lifestyle piece that I didn't like."
Mhm.
But and then I would wonder, "Oh gosh, if I was performing every night, then I would maybe be taking pills every night, and then it would become maybe an issue." Right?
Right,
Like,
right,
so
right,
then it's like,
right.
"Oh, yeah." But no,
And I mean,
I haven't tried it.
that's how a lot of people
Right.
in the industry get hooked, right? Because 'Cause you're taking something for nerves and then it just builds and builds and builds. I had to
Right.
be very intentional with myself. Also, the prescription from a doctor with Xanax, they're very strict about it. Like, you can't just go to CVS and get a new prescription. They have to call it
Wow.
in and things like that. So, they're preventative things because they know how addictive it can be. But
Yeah.
I really had to sit with myself. I don't have any people in my life who, suffer from, opiate addiction or anything like that, but
Yeah.
I know I have a very addictive personality, and I knew I would love the feeling of being on Xanax, so I had to be like, "Okay, let's not let this become a thing." Luckily, it has not, but I will tell you, if you're able to keep that under control, going on stage with it has really that and propranolol mixed together is, I
Yeah.
mean, I can't imagine life without them now. It really just rocked
Wow.
me.
What's the biggest difference? I mean, before and after, what does that feel like?
That several day long buildup where I'm just it's getting worse and worse because it's snowballing in my head about,
Yeah.
how bad it is. Even if I think about it, the physiological sensations are just not there. Like, I would have, like, a shortness of breath, I would have a rapid heart rate, I would just kinda go into panic mode, and now it kinda puts me in a place where I mean, the propranolol keeps my heart rate down, but the Xanax kinda keeps me from even really caring about, like, "Oh, what if, what if, what if?" The Xanax kinda puts me in like, "Well, we'll find out when we get there." Like, it's just
Yeah.
kinda puts you in a bit of a stony baloney situation, but at least under control enough where I am still nervous, like, I think also mind over matter. I think you could probably fight the drugs if it's, meaningful enough because I have experienced that where as I'm about to go on stage, it's almost as if no medication is in my body, and I still get that gut, like, "Holy
Mm,
shit, I'm about to be on stage" feeling.
right.
Um, but it's only for a second, and within 30 seconds of being out there, I'm totally fine. So it takes all of that buildup and all that anxiety takes such a massive chunk of it away and keeps you from panicking when you're on stage too. Because I used to always think, what if I have a panic attack right now as I'm on stage? And now I don't have
Right.
thoughts like that. So
Does it impact your, performance in any way in the sense of, like, comedic timing or anything? Like, has it
no,
nothing? It does
nothing.
not. Wow. So you can still be very clear-headed, deliver your things.
Yeah,
That's so
if
interesting.
anything, it makes it better because I'm more focused on the actual material than, only half thinking of the material and half worrying if I'm gonna freak out in front of everybody. So, um,
Wow, that's so
it
interesting.
it weirdly makes me feel sharper. But if you take too much, you get really sleepy. And there was definitely an adjustment period when I started taking Xanax where there was a moment on stage one time where I was like, "Oh my god, I could just nap right here and I wouldn't even care." And then because the Xanax is making you not care, so as I'm, like, kind of falling asleep, not there's I'm
Yeah.
medicated to not give a shit that people are about to see that happen. So I remember in one moment being like, "Oh, I think I'm supposed to, like, stay awake right now. I should probably care about trying to stay awake right now." But that happened for, like, one show, and had anyone noticed, I could have made a joke about it. I make a joke about Xanax every single time I'm nervous on stage, just like how earlier when you said,
Yeah.
"Oh, I messed up in my speech, and then because I made it more human, I actually got through it."
Yeah.
Anytime I feel like I mess up, I just go, "Oh, sorry, my Xanax hasn't kicked in yet." And everyone laughs, and then it's dismissed. So,
Yes, exactly. Those one-liners that you can keep in your back pocket are so great. Like
yeah.
I recommend if you're performing or you're giving presentations or anything, or even if you have social anxiety at parties, what
Yeah.
like 3 to 5 things can you keep in your back pocket to whip it out when you need it? Whether they are one-liners or questions you can ask people or just anything. I just having those, I didn't need to use them that much, but knowing that they were there made things so much easier to be on stage.
Yeah, oh, totally. And I nowadays I actually take propranolol all the time. I've been just given a daily prescription instead of just like for show times. It really has changed even my own social anxiety because all of the sensations that come with the anxiety just are so much lower.
Yeah.
And that's not really how it's supposed to be used. I just stumbled into it because I happen to be performing. I didn't realize how many people take beta blockers that are just performers. Because of that, I was able to talk to my doctor and I was like, "I actually just feel better all the time on this." And he was like, "Okay, we'll just make you take it all the time." That one I can definitely, condone or promote to people, but I do know like, Xanax is a touchy subject. I'm just lucky enough that I'm one of the people who could get my hands on it. And then on top of that, I never thought therapy could help me, but all the medication in the world has never helped me the way that therapy has this year. So,
Wow. Yeah. Do you want to share a little bit about that process? Because it's really fascinating what
yeah.
the exercise and stuff you've done around that.
It's bananas, and it's by the way, this is apparently a controversial practice. I don't know if it's because it's
Oh,
just not highly researched or it sounds very nutty to a lot of people. So, take it however you want to take it. I personally think if it works, it works. I'm very
yeah.
pro placebo effect or whatever's going on there.
Right. Right.
I feel changed for the better, so I'm going to work with it. The therapy that I'm in is it's called IFS. It's internal family systems.
Yes.
And basically the theory in IFS is that past trauma can stick to parts of you. They think very much in terms of your body is made of parts or your mind is made of parts and you can pay attention to just one part and that will in turn help the entire system or your entire body.
Yeah.
If past trauma can stick to parts of you or if an event or several events with a lot of trauma or a lot of emotions if they can affect you in a certain way parts of you can stick with that or hold on to it like anger or fear and they can kind of fester if you don't address them.
Mm.
So those parts of you that can hold on to those emotions, if they're not addressed, it will affect you as a whole. So that's at least the running theory. So my therapist has me has been trying to help me find those certain parts that are holding on to bad memories and addressing them individually so that way the rest of me can function properly. That way the bad memories once they're addressed, those parts that are harboring old emotions won't do any further collateral damage by giving me anxiety in today's world. Does that make sense?
Yeah, could you give an example of whatever you're comfortable with of
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
how that works?
I guess like the best example is that when we were first addressing my stage fright, my therapist helps me realize that if I'm this scared of being on stage, it becomes very woo woo because you kind of get in your head. You're supposed to sort of meditate and envision things that aren't really there. And I think a lot of people don't, if they're going in for like a logical reason for why they're acting a certain way, or if they're
Mm.
trying to get straightforward therapy, this maybe is just not for them. But I think a little more abstract than maybe some other clients of hers. And so this just worked very well for me.
Yeah.
But my therapist tried to help me realize that okay, what's this fear of being on stage? What's keeping you from you're backstage and then you open the curtain and you walk on stage? What's the thing that's in your way? She helped me realize that something similar must have happened when I was a kid that my brain is now fighting me on. And maybe not something so literal of me being backstage and then a bad thing happened and then I went on stage, but it
Right.
was more, how is this similar to your childhood? And it's your brain is associating it with former memories. So
Yeah.
looking back on my childhood, the big thing was that I grew up in this like super intense, very abusive household. And anytime eyes were on me, it was because I was in trouble.
Mhm.
So it's the fact that I was in a lot of ways, not by both parents or anything like that, but to one person in particular, I was often very neglected. But when attention was paid to me, it was always negative and it was always a very volatile negativity. It was so anytime I was paid attention to, it was bad.
Mm.
So I think part of my brain has associated that with if you're on stage, all eyes are on you. You think you're going to be in trouble. You think you're going to get yelled at. Now that I've formed this association, my therapist and I were like, okay, well, let's try to get through that and break the cycle that being on stage is now a bad thing. You're allowed to be looked at and you're not going to be in trouble like you did when you were a little kid.
Yeah.
She this is where it gets kind of woo-woo. So I'm sorry to all the more skeptical literal
I
people
love it.
listening,
Bring
but
it on, baby.
okay. So I don't know if this was just a tactic for me. I don't know if this is how it works with everybody else, but the way that we tackled it was that my therapist worked on me trying to personify these different parts of me. So there's a part of me that was scared to go on stage because it was trying to protect me from feeling the same anxiety I felt as a kid when people were looking at me.
Right.
And so this part, it was so vague and abstract and hard for me to like really know anything about it. And so my therapist was like, okay, well just put a face to it. Just put a name or a character to it. And that way you can look at it as its own separate being. That way
Yeah.
you feel removed enough that you can address them as if they're their own person, but also so you can validate the emotions. Cause I'm much better at sympathizing with other people's experience than actually letting myself feel any of my own emotions. And she was like, if we make this part of you its own person, then we can talk to it, we can think about it. You don't feel like you have to worry about being judged or judging yourself because it's all in this other person that's feeling this thing.
Yeah.
So she was like, okay, come up with a character for this feeling or this person that's trying to protect you from being on stage. And this sounds so stupid. I've already told you about this, but I kept hearing the word protector. My therapist kept saying the word protector,
Right.
which I guess is one of the main roles that they try to work with in IFS. And I kept envisioning the executor from Shrek, like Thelonious, like the kind of like dumb guy, but well, I picked him because when I was sitting with my feelings and I was thinking about my stage fright, it felt like someone was standing in my way from doing my literal job. Like someone was saying, don't go on stage no matter what. But I actually, like, the show's starting in 5 minutes. I have to do this. So you're in my way. And I kind of pictured this Thelonious guy from Shrek because at first glance, he's like this really like imposing, intimidating guy. But then after he opens his mouth, he's kind of just like bumbling around and trying his best to do his job, but he's kind of, maybe he's klutzy about it. So it felt like my anxiety of like it's trying to protect me from something, but it's actually to a detriment and it doesn't realize that it's doing more harm than good. We've been calling him the guard because I couldn't remember his name forever. So I was like, oh, the guard from Shrek. By the way, there's many characters. This is just like the main guy that I've been
Yeah.
having to deal with.
Yeah.
There's many more pieces to this, but when it comes to my stage fright, the guard from Shrek has been my main character I've been talking to in my sessions. And
I
by
love it.
talking to, it's more like kind of going into like that meditative state and just envisioning that the person is standing in front of you and just talking. Oh,
There
sorry.
are fireworks behind you. Oh my God.
Okay, so Apple has a new update where apparently if you stick your hands out for too long, things happen. I didn't realize.
Oh my gosh, that was like the most incredible moment too. You like, and then I started meditating, and then my God, are we having a spiritual experience?
Apple could tell that was actually the ghost of Steve Jobs himself.
That was incredible. Anyway, oh my gosh, go on.
Okay.
I'm so tech. You know me. My technology is not my strong suit.
It's a whole thing where every single one of the every hand gesture comes with like a new thing.
I haven't done any of the updates. Oh my gosh,
Here's
hilarious.
here's the sad one.
Oh
Hang on.
no, is it just rain? It is rain.
I should have done that when we were talking about our particularly happy and sad moments. But okay, so we're talking specifically to this guard who is the embodiment of my stage fright. In my sessions now, I kind of close my eyes, I envision him being there, and it's easier to talk to another person and acknowledge their feelings and look within. So it's helped me negotiate with myself in certain ways. So first, I would imagine myself backstage, and my therapist would be like, "Okay, where's the guard? Is he standing right at the curtain, and you just can't get around him because he's blocking your path? Is he, where is he?" And the more that I've talked to him, my relationship with him has changed, which is interesting because it means that my own relationship with my anxiety is changing. But at first, I kind of, anytime I would envision him, he was standing right by the curtain. He was not letting me pass. He was like just this big wall in my way, and he was this very like he did not act like Thelonious from Shrek. He just looked like him, but he actually had like this very no nonsense guard standing in front of a castle kind of vibe, kind of like the royal guard, how you're not allowed to, they don't speak to you, they don't look at you, they don't
Right.
acknowledge you, they're just there. This part of me was like, I don't need to look at you, I don't need to acknowledge you, I don't care if I'm in your way, I'm doing my job and you should be thankful that I'm being so protective of you. That was the vibe that I was getting through my sessions, where I've just kind of I've envisioned myself standing next to him and just talking to him and hoping he hears me out. I've had to learn to befriend this character instead of thinking of him as my enemy, thinking of this anxiety as my enemy and only resenting myself for having it. Instead, it's more like a friend, like a person that you don't, like an office person where you guys don't get along, but you just have to because you're working on this big project together. That's how it felt, where I was like, look, you don't like me, I don't like you, but we got to figure out a way to make this work. And I acknowledge that you think you're doing a good job. I appreciate the good parts of what you're doing because you're so loyal to protecting me. But at the same time, like, I have to go out there and you cannot be this intimidating because you're freaking me out. You're making it seem much worse on the stage than it probably is because
Right.
you're giving all this intense energy that is unnecessary. So instead of being a 10 out of 10 on the intensity scale, when I go on stage tonight, can you just be a 9 out of 10? You can still be super scary, but can you just drop it down a little bit?
Yeah.
And I had never heard that concept before of, because I always thought, oh, I'm really nervous, I have to be not at all nervous. It never occurred to me I could just do it in increments. And through our sessions, I'd be able to say, okay, this time can we maybe do an 8 out of 10? Or hey, the next leg that's coming up, it's our last leg and we've done a really good job. Is there any way we could bring it down to a 7 out of 10? So at the very end of the tour, we got down to a 6 out of 10, where I was
Wow.
nearly feeling half as stressed as I ever had. And then you pair that with my propranolol and my Xanax, I
Yeah.
was
Feeling good.
having a good time. And I was actually noticing, which I didn't even occur to me that this would happen, but I guess this is normal in IFS, is that the more that I would talk to this guard character, or I was talking to my anxiety, I noticed my relationship was changing, where the guard was looking different. He used to be this really staunch guy who wouldn't acknowledge me, and now like he's kind of like, his posture is kind of down a little bit, like he's a little less intense, and he actually seems, when I envision him, I don't think of him as someone I have to like look up to because he's this big imposing guy. He's actually at my height. He just doesn't feel as like high alert. He just feels like we've gotten to a point where we have like a mutual respect for each other of like, I don't like what you're all about, but I know you're here to stay. So let's figure
Yeah.
out how we can do this. Anyway, I know this is like the nuttiest thing in the whole world, but
No, not at all. I mean, it makes so much sense. Well, when you can separate something like that and personify it, I think it can start to lose its power over you, as you can say,
yeah,
like you're already at a 6 out of 10.
yeah,
And you can I think it would be easier to kind of like laugh, like, okay, this fucking guy again, really
yeah,
serious. Okay, I think it can kind of ease that tension. And there's so many studies about visualizations and how incredibly
yes,
powerful
yeah.
they are, whether it's from, you're reading the articles about how they help athletes when if you can envision, making the baskets over and over, and then that the people that do make more points or whatever. Or there's, if you're in a room with people and you have them try to turn as far as they can around. Have you heard that?
Yeah.
Like, and then you have them do it a second time, but before they do, you have everybody visualize turning around really far, and then everybody goes farther the second time. I mean, just weird stuff
Oh,
like that
wild.
where visualizations work. Something's going on in the brain. So I think it makes total sense
Well,
that
thank
this
you.
is
I
helping. Yeah.
I mean, I really, and there's other characters at play, but he has definitely been the one, to a point where I've actually thought about like even like getting a tattoo of him, just because like I'm like, I know you're here to stay. This is me like showing my homage to you. Like
Yeah.
we're on the same playing field. Before I had this under my belt, I would get so nervous even like the day before I couldn't leave the hotel room. I couldn't eat certain foods. Like, I mean, it was impossible. And now after doing this therapy, I have full itinerary schedules the day of a show, and I'm out trying all these foods and I'm doing all these kind of thrill seeking things. I'm like exploring towns, and so like, and that would have just never happened. And my own show that you went to, where
Yeah.
30 people were going to be in the audience that I knew, I was totally fine the whole day. I grabbed my keys at like, whenever I had to go to the theater, and I just drove to the theater, and I was like, okay, well, people are going to see me. That's fine. Insane, because I would have been in the corner throwing up before. So
Wow.
anyway, I highly recommend it. I
So amazing.
just like how your team visualization, I'm team blaming your problems on something else. And so it's very lovely to just have that in my back pocket of like, oh, that's not me causing this. That's just like,
Right. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I think I told you this. I used to personify my perfectionism, and I talked about it on the podcast years ago, and I can't remember the fucking name I gave her, but she is just a very uptight British woman being like, are you sure you're qualified to do
mhm.
that? It just helps to be like, this is so silly that
Yeah.
I am speaking so meanly to myself. And then when you put a different voice and character on it, it's easier to tell that person to fuck right off. I mean,
That's
it's powerful,
That's
right?
how I
Like,
feel with my ADHD, because I can't. I'm 32 and can't do the laundry. What is wrong with me? And then I'm like, no, no, no. It's just Todd, or we just weird, whatever. There's someone else that can't do the laundry, and somehow I'm dealing with the consequences of that. But it's not me. It's him. So
yes. And I also want to talk about the very powerful thing and aha moment and everything that you had growing up. Attention equaled danger, right? Like
hmm
attention is bad, attention is danger, attention does not make you feel good. And so trying to fly under the radar, not attract too much attention. When you do get attention and things are going well, do you feel like, well, it's only a matter of time before somebody says something terrible or mean, or something goes wrong? I don't know if you ever felt that way. I think for me it's like, well, this is going fine now, but it's only a matter of time before all this comes crashing down, and
yeah,
I
I
can't
think
rectify that?
I get that most often when it comes to like the fear of like bombing on stage.
Mm.
And like, but luckily for me, we have a script that we are constantly doing rewrites on to make sure that it's the best version possible. I think if I
Yeah.
were, I am terrified of like a heckler or someone, because I'm not prepared for that, and I don't want to not say the right thing, and all of a sudden like the whole vibe of the show is off. So
Mhm.
I think in that way a lot, but when it comes to the actual show, I am never worried about the script too much. I'm always worried in the first couple shows because I don't know how it's going to be received, but I'm pretty confident in the work that I give. I think I have moments like that though when it comes to like interviews. There have been a few times where we were like on the news and there was a reporter asking me live a question. And thank God their job when it comes to interviewing people who have never really been on TV quite a lot is they do a lot of lowball, lot of softball questions. Softball,
Okay.
lowball. They lob you questions that you like, even if you're super stressed, you know the answer to. It's like, how did the
Right.
podcast start? Something like that.
Right,
But
right.
I do always get nervous to like, what if I'm trying to be quirky and I say something that's like so messed up? Or like, what if which like I've never done that, but in my head, I'm always petrified for that moment where on top of my stage fright, the fear of cancel culture is something I'm
Yeah.
constantly thinking about, because nobody's safe. If you say you like cats, dog people freak out. So, um, which, I'd like to think if I were to have to be canceled, it wouldn't be for anything too intense, but you just never know if something you say is going to be received poorly. So that freaks me out, which is why I like to stick to a script. So I don't know. What about you?
Yeah, I do have a weird relationship with attention. I want just enough to be successful enough to pay my bills and make money, but I don't really want more than I need.
Mm-hmm.
And I've felt that from very beginning of getting into entertainment and performance and stuff like that. There is a big fear around getting too much attention for me. I've seen and experience things that make it feel a little dangerous. But I know that comes from my own childhood stuff of
Mm-hmm.
having a weird relationship with attention just based on my environment. So like, yeah, I mean, I know where it comes from. How can I be okay being imperfect publicly,
Mm-hmm.
when there was a lot of self-doubt my experience was sometimes it was a good thing and sometimes it was a bad thing. So it was back and forth. It wasn't all good. It wasn't all bad. So I have that for myself. It's like, it's good and then it's bad. And I go back and forth with myself, but I know that's not really me talking. So
Right.
it's hard. I'm trying to separate myself from like the kind of conditioning and stuff that I had.
When you were on stage, did you have any like tricks for yourself or like any things that really helped you?
Yes. Well, it's so interesting when you were talking about performance anxiety and stuff like that. I never really felt nervous if I was with a group of people. So I played basketball, I was in drumline, I did improv and sketch comedy and all that stuff. So if I'm on stage with a group of people or on, a team, I don't really feel that. But if it's by myself, I feel so scared. Things for myself that I would always do that helped is trust myself to acknowledge the elephant in the room or whatever, or the thing that happens in the moment. So, for example, if you've ever seen somebody on stage and maybe somebody in the crowd spills a drink and it makes a loud crash, and that
Mm-hmm.
person doesn't acknowledge it, we all know what happened, but that person just tries to power through. It's uncomfortable, right? Like it doesn't really work because everybody's like, well, if you're not going to acknowledge it, I'm going to have to see for myself what's going on over here. And then
Yeah.
all the attention's over there. So those moments, like it's okay, reminding yourself it's okay to say, oh, whatever, even if you have nothing witty to say, acknowledging that happened, or like, oh, that person's going to have a rough day at work tomorrow, or whatever, right? Anything that
Yeah.
comes to your mind, it's okay. And then everybody can say, okay, great. Now we can put our attention back on the show or
Sure.
whatever. So having that trust in your own instincts, I think is important. And I think that helped me a lot of like, I just trust myself that I'll know what to do or say in the moment,
Mm-hmm.
because instead of trying to think I have to say every word perfectly and I have to whatever. And then I learned very early on I could not have an ounce of caffeine or alcohol before performing at all. Nothing.
I
Not
also
even a
can't.
sip. The way that adrenaline or whatever is pumping through your body just enhances all of those things. I
Mm-hmm.
remember having a couple sips of coffee once and just shaking the whole time I was on stage.
I could feel it in my heart. I thought I was having like a heart attack. I was like, oh my God, like how am I gonna get through this? Yeah.
Absolutely wild. I don't know how people do it, but for me, it has just the opposite effect of calming nerves or making me clear headed. I remember having a couple sips of alcohol. I felt like I was slurring my words. I mean, it was crazy. So I knew that early on. Just don't. I was always prepared to just have the shits all day before a show and leading up to the show. So I knew, like, all right, on show days, I was really eating like peanut butter and jelly and
That's what
drinking
I would do.
water.
That's exactly what I was doing.
Basic stuff. Basic. I'm like, okay, I feel like it's hard to have the shits with PBJ. Maybe I'm wrong, but we'll see. So that was always helpful. Just having those just rituals and routines around performance, and just expecting that you're going to feel that way and not being surprised when it shows up. Let's see. Oh, I would always have my set list in my back pocket. So
Smart.
I had a stack of postcards, or well, not what are they called? Note cards? The white paper and the lines across.
Oh,
from,
index cards?
index cards, the ones that you like use for an exam or something. I always had those, and I would write out my set, fold it, and put it in the back pocket of my pants for every single show, whether it was a TV taping or performing at a random bar. And I never really had to look at it, but just knowing it was there
Yep.
made me feel comfortable. Like, okay, if I really lose my place, I can just grab this, no big deal. So it became like this weird totem that I would carry around. Again, having all those like one-liners in my back pocket, whether it was an opening line or a line, like if I forgot something. And sometimes I would just think of the worst case scenario. Like, all right, you're worried that you're going to black out on stage and forget what you were going to say. What would you do about it? And then I would come up with like solution A, B, C, D, whatever. And let's say that you have a really bad set and people don't think you're funny and you suck. Like, all right, what are you going to do about that? So for me, thinking of worst case scenario was helpful.
I also always wondered, what happens if I ever bomb? What happens? What happens? And then we had a show where I don't know what the fuck was going on. I think every single person in that audience bought a ticket to a different show and didn't went on the wrong day or something. And I know that sounds crazy. I still believe it to this day, because even like the low branch jokes that we would always do to get a rise out of people, nobody was reacting to anything. It was like they'd never heard of us, to a point where my co-host Christine on stage was like, "Are you guys at the right show? Like, are you okay? Like, because most people come here already having listened to the show or knowing certain things, or they get excited when we mention certain names or whatever."
Right.
And no one was reacting to anything. We were like, this is so freaky. Like, I really think they thought a different actor was going to be on stage. But my fear was always, what if we bomb? And that's the
Yeah.
closest to bombing. No one booed us, but I did
Right.
also have to go on a stage and for 2 hours watch nobody smile or laugh. That didn't feel good. I at least now can say, "Okay, I survived it, and you know what? At the end, I still got a paycheck." So,
Right. Right.
it's
Absolutely. Oh my
just
gosh. Oh,
gonna have to make it work.
worst show of my fucking life was in, I think it was like the middle of Barstow, California, somewhere at a bowling alley. First of all, it's so fucking loud, right? And then they have
Right.
a comedy
Worst
show
place for
happening.
a show.
And then it's at a bar. So it's at a bar and a bowling alley, but there's no divider between the bowling alley and the bar.
Ugh,
So it's just a big open room. You're hearing pins, you're hearing people making margaritas at the bar, and you're supposed to somehow have a good show when it's
right.
just full of distractions. But what's also interesting is that everybody is a different type of laugher. Like when
Mhm.
you're in an audience of people, some people are very vocal and very animated when they laugh, and some people are very quiet giggle laughs, and some
Yeah.
people are just like, huh, that was funny, right? Like, and
Yeah.
so I think it's also important to kind of try not to take things personally, because you can have an audience full of really light laughers that you feel like, is this going well?
I've learned that's the Midwest because they're all so
Oh,
polite and they're just like, "Ah, ha,
right.
ha, ha," and they don't wanna
Right.
disturb me. Anytime we've
Then
gone to the Midwest,
yes.
it depends on what part of the Midwest, because some of them really like to drink, and that really helps the laughs get out, but most of the time, like, I noticed in the Midwest, if they're not drinking, they're just very just like, "Oh, that's so lovely, ha ha." I don't know if that's, like I'm probably definitely stereotyping, but I've noticed that now when I go to Midwest shows, I have to remind myself, I'm like, "Okay, they might be a little quiet until the drinks kick in. That's gonna be okay." And every time that's been
Right.
true. So I am just and it helps me because 'cause I'm like, "Okay, at least I prepared for this. I know they're having a good time. I know that they're happy. I'm just waiting for that beer to hit." That's all.
Not taking things personally in that sense, I think, is a helpful tip. Even if it feels quiet, you don't that could be somebody's big laugh. You just don't
Right.
know all of these people personally. And I don't know if you've ever been to like a show with somebody who's a very quiet laugher, and then or some kind of experience. Oh, did you have a good time or whatever? Like, oh my
Mhm.
God, it was hilarious. Oh, really? Because I barely heard a peep out of you.
I
So
know.
I think that's helpful to know. And then also, I think shifting the focus away from myself as a performer was helpful in the sense of all these people are here because they just want to have a good time with their friends, their family, their significant other, whatever it is. They're here to like create memories for themselves. It's not really
Mhm.
about you. They're going out for fun right now for them. You're just part of that experience.
Yep.
You might be one of many performers on a lineup. You might even be the main act, but they're there because they want to have fun with their
Yeah, they're there for
people.
quality time with each other. Like, you're just
Yeah.
kind of the jester being you're the town idiot a little bit.
When you realize some of my friends who are stand-ups, they will work on an hour special and they will go over every word, and it's very methodical and there's a lot of effort put into it, right? It's like their whole world, right? Understandably. And then you like hear a conversation with people who are like, oh yeah, I watched so and so special, that was funny, I also watched this one, and then moving on to the next part of the conversation. It's a split second or an hour of enjoyment in this person's life. And then over
Yeah.
here, as the performer, it's like their whole life. And I think
Mhm.
remembering that is helpful, is like
That's
that
so
might
helpful.
help like take the pressure off. Your show or your speech or your whatever is one of 1,000 that that person is going to watch or enjoy in their life. And it doesn't have to be all on you. I find that kind of helpful of like, oh, these people, they don't care as much as I do about what I'm up to, you know?
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. I mean, and it's always lovely when there are surprise audience members who actually had more fun than they planned on having. That always feels
Yeah.
really when we
Yeah.
had I'm aware of my audience. We don't have a lot of men listening to the show. But so most of the time if I'm looking in the audience and I see men, I'm like, "Oh, that was a boyfriend who got dragged here. That was a husband who got dragged here. That maybe you're the one in a million man who actually listens to us. That'd be great." But
Yeah.
most of the time it's boyfriends who get dragged there. And when we would do meet and greets, anytime someone would bring their boyfriend, he would always be sitting in the audience with his arms crossed. He never make a peep. He wouldn't even look like he would rather be anywhere else. That was the vibe that he was giving. But then
Yeah.
and through the meet and greet, he'd be like, "I was having such a good time." So just like what you were saying earlier, where it you don't know what's going on in someone's head. I actually
Yeah.
now have a heightened awareness about myself because I realized I was someone who didn't openly laugh louder than maybe someone was hoping.
Too.
Um,
Yes.
And
Yes.
now I'm like, "Oh, shit, like, maybe they saw me and they think I got dragged here and I need to, like, really put it on for them."
Oh my gosh, I'm exactly the same. It made me realize, well, what kind of laugher am I? And then I started like observing my own self. I'm like, I'm not a very loud laugher. I would hate to have a room full of Delanies for a show. And
Yes,
so
me
then it's like,
too.
okay, I want to make sure that the performer or whoever is speaking feels heard and all that stuff. I actively participate more because of that experience. I'm doing the same thing that I'm so scared about.
Mhm. And, like, it's
So
almost like one
weird.
of those, like, pointing a finger, but you're pointing at yourself kinda things.
And I
"Oh, I'm scared of me." Okay.
yeah, exactly. Oh my God. You get a whole nother that's a whole nother episode. Um, but it's interesting to also now I feel like I'm taking these tips for myself from the performer life and now I'm plugging them into like now I have social anxiety at parties and now I'm
Mhm.
like pulling these tips that I used to use for something very different and I'm infusing them somewhere else.
Yeah. I feel like for me, it was almost Pandora's box. I feel like I never had social anxiety until I started addressing my stage anxiety. And now that I'm talking about anxiety and I'm thinking about my anxiety and I'm letting myself feel my anxiety, I'm realizing, holy shit, there's anxiety everywhere. And so
Yeah, yeah.
now, and I don't know if maybe it was just an age thing and I kind of grew into this phase, or a part of me kind of sometimes wishes I could just like close the box again and just like not be aware of any of it, because now I'm like, oh, my whole life is different than I thought. I'm just so sad and scared all the time. So I'm like,
Mm,
where, I'm like, I don't know how to make it end. That's been stressful, but at least I'm like getting the tools for it. But when it comes to the stage fright, weirdly, the best tip I have, which seems so counterproductive, is on days where we had shows where I was feeling extra nervous or my medication hadn't kicked in yet, and so I was still feeling all the elements of anxiety.
yeah.
I would literally walk on stage before the show ever started, and I would just say into the microphone. Again, I'm very lucky. I have an audience full of people just like me. Our fan base is women with social anxiety, queer people with social anxiety. That's kind of our bread and butter. So it worked out well that I have the right people that would be in the audience. But I just go out there and I'm like,
Right.
I'm really, really going through it right now. Like, I'm so scared. And when I walk out here later, just know that I'm trying my best. We'll get, and that seems like, oh, you're ruining the vibe. Like all of a sudden, like nobody wants to go to a comedy show and the comedian comes out first and goes, I'm scared. Like nobody, like they would think that's part of the bit. But people have
Mm.
heard me for years talk about how bad my stage fright is. I don't know. I must be phrasing it the right way where it's being received well. I just have really lovely listeners who have been following me for a lot of years. But every time I've gone out there, it's weirdly empowering. I get the jitters out because now I'm seeing them. They look like, people like me instead of this big scary monster I'm envisioning backstage. And it's, normalizing for, mental health. And but every time I go out there, I end up getting like the weirdest, biggest applause. But a lot of people are
Wow.
just like, "We love you, like we get it. We're also scared." So it's
Oh my gosh, that is so brilliant. I thought you were saying in the beginning that you would visit the stage hours
no,
before the show
in
just to
front
be
of
on stage.
everybody.
You would go before the show started and say, "I just want to let you know I'm going through it." Wow, I love that. That is
Which
super cool and courageous and brilliant to do.
I don't, it feels so backwards because it's like, so you're scared of everyone, so you're gonna go out there twice now? You're gonna walk back out again later?
I get
And
though that it's like relieving the pressure or like de-escalating though, right? Like I mean,
yeah,
how
it
can
gets
it
it
not?
it
That's
really
so
gets all
good.
the nervous energy out because I've already talked to them. It's already like
Right.
my big fear of going out on stage has already happened. So even if I'm ruining the reveal of me, like I don't really think anyone is there for a reveal of me. But I'm at
Wow.
least, I was really paranoid for a long time about, oh, I'm ruining the vibe, but people have been wonderful. And I think also because I usually end on saying like mental health matters. I'm really sorry if this is like killing the energy, but I just wanted to get this out of the way. So when you see me, just know that I'm doing my best. We're all doing our best.
I love this so much because I mean, it's honest, it's true, it helps. And I think so many performers they feel like they have to pretend that they're not scared and nervous because it
Hmm.
says something about them or whatever, whatever they got going on. I love the fact that you like you do that and you admit that, and that gives people permission to do that in their own lives in their own way with whatever they're going through. I think that is so cool.
Thank you.
Anytime that I could, I would try to get on the stage before the show started without anybody there if I could.
Mm-hmm.
Just to see like what is
Get
this
a
place,
feel.
yeah, what is this place going to feel like? I look around. That reminds me, like what you do reminds me of, well, in a way it's like you're facing your fear head on, and you're kind of making the thing that you're scared about happen on your terms in a way. But
Yeah.
I know that this was an exercise that one of like an improv teacher a long time ago had us do, where we all talked about our biggest fears on stage. Of course, bombing, this thing's not going well, whatever. And so this teacher would make us do on purpose the worst, most unfunny scene that you could think of up front before getting into the other rest of the class or show or whatever.
That's
It
great.
it's everybody's biggest fear, and then you're getting it out of the way, and now you can just play. And what would happen is they were so bad and ridiculous on purpose that they were fucking hilarious a lot of the time, because
Mm-hmm.
the whole class knew like you're trying to make this as terrible as possible. And I love that whole concept of, right, make a shitty first draft on purpose and just
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
out of the way. You're scared of it anyway, so just start with that and make it really dumb and really bad and the worst thing you could imagine, whatever you're creating or whatever, and move on. And it kind of reminds me of like, oh yeah, let's do the thing that we're afraid of really quick, and then
That's so smart.
we can
And
move on.
it makes the connection with the audience, at least on my end. I don't know about them. It feels more human for me because they're not scary. They're just people. Sometimes I look out in the audience and there's people wearing shirts with like my show's name on it. And there have been
Yeah.
some people who've literally made like custom shirts with like my face on it. So all of a sudden I'm like, wow, like you already like me enough that if I mess up today, I'm probably okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but then but the panic before that was they're showing up with my face on their shirt, like the pressure is on. But once I see them and like I'm having this human experience with them that has nothing to do with the show. It's like I'm just talking to people. The amount of people who from the audience have also shouted back, "We're scared too," is amazing.
That is
It makes me feel so much better because I'm like, okay, so we're all freaking out. Like you don't even have to be on the stage and you're freaking out. So
oh my
it's very
gosh.
helpful.
Oh gosh, that is so funny. You know what I've noticed? I feel like my social anxiety, or just that type of anxiety, I don't think it used to be very bad, or I
No,
wasn't
I
aware of
think
it. I
it
wasn't
must be
present.
age or something.
And also now that I think I quit stand up like 6.5 years ago. It's been a while. And I think I did it for 6.5 years, something like that. Doing stand up was the scariest thing ever in my life. It made other things feel a lot easier. It made social events feel like not a big problem, career wise, whatever. I didn't feel the nerves the way that I did with stand up. It was so intense. And
Mhm.
I feel like the longer that's behind me, that it's wearing off. But now that that's further away, I am getting nervous about those things that I didn't used to get nervous about.
Yeah, well, because 'cause you're speaking less and less to people, so I guess now it's like when it does happen, that's where the
Exactly.
feelings go. Yeah, that makes sense.
It's not in my life anymore, this big comparison.
When you have these moments where now you have to talk to people, where does it kinda show up?
Whether I'm going to be around a group of people, or maybe it's like a work event or professional event where I'm going to be around. In past career settings, I felt like I couldn't fully be myself because, I mean, I'm a little bit more unfiltered than probably most corporate settings, like stuff like that. I felt like I fit in pretty well when I was younger, and now I feel like I don't fit in well in certain ways. I'm not a big drinker anymore. Like I don't really drink alcohol, so obviously that was helping at some point in my life with nerves and stuff like that.
I think maybe it was because I wasn't an adult yet, but in my college years, I had no problem. I mean, I was such an extrovert. There was not a party I was not going to. There was not a club I wasn't trying to join. I
Yeah.
had no problem approaching people, and I think it's because part of me knew it's college. We're all new from not being at home. We're all a little scared, whether or not we're saying it. And
Yeah.
even like when you were like joining a club and it was the first day, nobody knew anyone, so I felt safe to kind of have the confidence of like, oh, we're all scared to be here, right? Okay, great. And it just felt so much more communal. But I
Yeah.
think the
Yeah.
older we get, anytime I now have to socialize in a foreign area, it's like if I'm going to an influencers thing, or if there's there have been premieres I've been invited to and I'm supposed to like, promote that later.
Yeah.
I always get nervous in those because everybody else seems to like have already formed a clique or knows what they're doing, or I don't have as much experience with that, and I never know what a networking party is supposed to look like. In my mind, I take it seriously of like, oh, let's all become like friends and network, but usually what it means is people bring their plus one and then they stick with their own group and nobody actually networks. And so, or that's my experience so far, because I apparently can't do it right. So I just wish everyone could just say out loud that they're a little scared, and because I can't tell anymore. I used to be able to just kind of venture a guess and be right, but now I don't know. Like, am I going up to someone who's actually like has no fear and I look like an idiot who's trying to like cozy up to them and bump elbows, So like at a party with your friends that I went to, I felt good because I was like, oh, maybe they don't all know each other either. But if it
Yeah.
were
Yeah.
but
And
if
you're
it
right.
were
Yeah.
if it were a big corporate thing and I'm the new kid at the office, but everyone else has known each other for years, then all of a sudden I'm really intimidated because I'm outnumbered basically.
Yeah, I wasn't nervous at your party because I know that whoever spends time with you, I'm gonna let you know what I mean? They're
Yeah,
gonna be
yeah, exactly.
open-minded people and all that stuff. It's when I feel like going to weddings is a big one for me. I
Oh,
always feel anxious when it's that kind of event, or,
mhm.
it's usually around the questions that I get that make me uncomfortable.
What do
Oh,
you do?
yeah, what do you do? When are you and Cam having kids? Why don't you